Hi, I'm Tina White with the Asheville View, and I'm here today with Lane Wagner, also known as Natasha Noir Nightly. Natasha, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. So take us inside. First of all, when we talk about the drag community in Asheville, how big is it in terms of number of people, in terms of number of places, or however you would define it?
Wow. I would say drag community in Asheville is very large, considering how the size of the city. I would say we have, God, I don't even know how many. I would say close to about like a little less than 100 performers in town at any given point, and that's any that I would say any that either call Asheville home or perform frequently in Asheville. Because we consider some drag queens from Johnson City as Asheville drag queens, some from other parts of the state who perform primarily in Asheville. And then places, we have so many places to perform now. We used to only have two bars, and now we're performing in everything from bars to pizza places to grocery stores to parks. Anywhere you look, you're most likely probably about to find a drag queen in Asheville.
What about the venues, the
Mhm.
places? Are there, is it just one place? Where would people go to see drag normally in Asheville?
During times that's not COVID, there's drag at O. Henry's, which is a gay bar. There's drag at Scandals, which is a dance club. There is drag at Banks Avenue, which is a queer bar. There's drag at the Auditorium, which is a dive bar. There's drag at Hopi & Co., which is a grocery store. There's drag at Sly Grog, which is a dive bar. There's drag at in Silva. There's drag at a pizza place called Lazy Hiker. There's drag. Lord, where else are we? There's drag at Storm Rum Bar. We do a drag trivia night there. There was a drag trivia night going on at Room 9. There is a drag trivia, or not Room 9, 27 Club, that one. Different numbers. So yeah, there are a lot of places to go when everything's functioning normally. Right now, drag isn't really in person, mostly because a lot of the places that we would be performing can't be open with the state's regulations on what can and cannot be operating right now. Right now, we're under a rule where anywhere that serves less than 30%, so they have to have over 30% of their income come from food. And so if a lot of places in Asheville that are bars don't have food, and so they can't be open right now. On top of the fact that any place that serves alcohol cannot serve alcohol past 11 right now in Asheville. And so we typically start our shows at like 11, 12. So it's not really conducive to having a good drag show right now. There are some places online that you can catch them. Banks Avenue does one every Friday. And so they bring in queens to an empty bar and live stream their performance. There are some other online shows that you can find. I don't know if any are like Asheville specific, but a lot of people are sending in recordings of them performing in front of a camera, and that's been a fun way to see different people's creativity, because they'll have like, bed sheets hung up or like dresses as if they were drapes and different curtains and things. So that's been kind of fun to watch.
So when you talked earlier about the drag community,
Yeah.
are these just performers? I know some belong to houses, and I'm not even sure I fully understand what that is. Tell me about, just from terms of their living style, who is this? Tell me more about this drag community.
So we call anybody who performs in drag the drag community, because we are a community of artists who are utilizing the same medium to do different things. Drag houses are more like gangs than they are like actual physical houses. The term house kind of became popularized out of the 80s, 90s drag culture, specifically the black ball culture of New York. And so if you watch Paris is Burning, you've heard of like house this, house that. And that's, they function as a family. And so a drag house is more like a drag family. And so we support each other. We do a lot of stuff together. We're friends outside of drag, not just in drag. And a queen or a king or a performer tends to become part of a house when you, at least for my personal house, if you are down with our message. And so some houses are very aesthetic driven, and so they all look very similar. Ours is very much politically motivated, and so we have our drag is very much based in social advocacy, and we do a lot of be who you want to be in and out of drag. And so we don't really have a lot of rules of how you need to look to be part of the house. We tend to be a bit more alternative in my house than others, but that's just because that's kind of who we are as people. We find a lot of weird things beautiful, and so we end up looking kind of weird. And so my house is the Temple Nightshade. It was started, my drag sister, and I were part of another house that ended up just kind of dissolving. Our mom moved away, and there was just some other stuff going on. And so my sister and I decided we're going to make a house, and we're going to have very specific ideas around why we're a house, what we do, and who we accept into our family. And since then, we've become a very concrete micro community. And so we still hang out during quarantine. We do social distance things and everything, and it's been really nice to have that community. But there are I would say close to like 10 to 15, might be an overestimation, houses in Asheville. And they are constantly changing, constantly shifting. New people are added. Sometimes people leave just because they move, or the disagreements in families can happen. It's very Game of Thrones, honestly. And so it's it can be exhausting trying to keep up with it. But yeah, there are quite a few houses in Asheville.
So unpack for me the two words you just used a lot, mom and family.
Yeah.
Are they intended to mean something very similar? I mean, where that, again, someone not familiar with drag would think of those words, or do they have a somewhat different meaning?
In the drag community, it kind of is a little different than traditional like mom dad situation, where drag house came from the mom of the family. This is kind of discussed in Paris is Burning. The mom of the family was more of an established performer, a person who took care of a lot of other people. And so in the queer community, a lot of times we've had chosen family, because there are times where our biological family don't want anything to do with us. And so we end up forming familial connections to people that aren't biologically related to us. And so they become our family. In drag, it more refers to drag lineage, so who your mentor is. And so my drag mom was kind of more of an alternative performer. Her drag mom was a pageant queen. Her drag mom so there's this drag family tree that all stems from different people who are like, yes, you're my drag daughter, and I'm going to help you perfect your craft. And so now I have drag children who are in my drag house, and they are my drag spawn, basically. And so I have some who, one is, I think she just turned 14. And then I have most of all of my other kids are age-wise older than me, but drag-wise younger than me, because I've been doing drag longer than they have, but they've been alive longer than me. And so I act as a mentor with makeup techniques, helping with performance, helping prep for any shows. I give advice on what I would do in certain situations because I am a more seasoned performer. And we have this whole little family based off of mentorship, basically. And there are 3 matriarchs in my drag family, and each one has their own set of drag children. So I technically have drag nieces and nephews, but they are not my children because they don't follow my personal aesthetic. Their drag does not fit in with a lot of the techniques that I use. And so they are under our political message and do a lot of our agree with a lot of our family foundations, but their art style fits into one of like 3 categories. And that's just how our family personally functions.
So people shouldn't picture that a family means that you're all sort of living out of a living room or whatever. Yeah.
That's a little less common now, but I will say I have hosted my drag kids before. If they needed a place to crash, they slept on my couch. And I know some people who do live more with their drag families because it's easier to afford a house if there's more people there, like a physical house, not a drag house.
So I grew up with the image of drag as something that was done by gays, for gays in nightclubs. Yeah. And that was pretty much it. I get the impression over the last, I don't know if it's 5 or 10 years, the role, the audience has changed, the purpose of drag has changed. What's going on?
So RuPaul's Drag Race has changed a lot. It's brought drag into the forefront of social awareness. And so people see drag and want to do drag now because it's a little bit more socially acceptable. In the past, probably like 5 or 6 years, I would say, I've seen drag change from like by gays, for gays to by queer people for people. I was talking to you before. I feel like a little bit of an old lady sometimes talking about this because I'm only 26, but I've seen a definitive chapter end and begin in drag. When I started, there were only 2 places in Asheville that you could perform. You had to look a very specific way. You had to have sequins, big hair, rhinestones, all of this. No beard. You had to look like a female impersonator. And that I'm specifically talking from a drag queen's perspective because I'm a little bit less familiar with drag king. And so now there are so many places that are, you want to look like a bunny? Okay, come in, perform, look like a bunny. We're performing so many places now that there is a flood of a new generation of drag queens who want to be booked, want to perform, and which is awesome. And there's so many more opportunities for them to perform now. When before, like I had to go in drag 2 shows, and that was how I got my name out. And there was no guarantee that you would be performing. There was no open mic. A lot of times I had to pay to participate in talent shows to perform. And when I was paying to perform, I wasn't receiving tips because it was a competition. And so you don't get paid for a competition. And it was a lot of initial investment in not just the costumes and the hair and the makeup, but also in like kind of buying a spot on stage. Whereas a lot of times now, there are free to perform beginner nights. There are, $5 entry fee talent nights where you do get to collect tips. There are beginner drag shows. There are drag shows specifically catered towards queens who have never performed before. And so a lot of newer drag queens, I don't want to say have it easier because I feel like that's a very jaded thing to say. I feel like there's just a bit more opportunity. And so there's not as much hostility when it comes to trying to get booked because you're not fighting over 8 spots in town. And there's like 400 spots in town to perform. And if, you don't like any of those venues, you're more than welcome to go and start your own. Sometimes the people who start their own have no business starting a drag show, but, they live, they learn, and they become better performers. And so it's definitely changed since I started drag, because I started drag as a bearded performer, and that was seen as revolutionary. Whereas now there are people who are painting on like 7 or 8 eyes and doing prosthetic noses in where their ears should be, and, coming out as farm animals as a drag character. And everyone's like, yep, that's drag. That's cool. And so it's just been very different to see where drag has come from when I started.
Fascinating. You mentioned that your house has a political platform. Can you tell me more about that?
So Temple Nightshade uses drag as a political tool for social advocacy. We stand for queer people in queer spaces. We stand for education. We are very loud about consent, about safe sex, and we educate a lot about queer sex. And we partner with a lot of local charities to raise money. We partner with different organizations who hold fundraising events or even just educational events. I personally speak on Vino and Vulva's panels about different aspects of sexuality. Every time I get on the microphone at any show or any organization, if I have a mic, I always talk about consent and different safe sex practices. We've also done mini lectures before shows or at intermissions about PrEP and PEP and HIV prevention and treatment. We keep counseling business cards in all of our purses to be able to hand out. We are working to be able to carry Narcan, which is like an adrenaline EpiPen for people who overdose. We try to serve our community, and that's kind of the basis of our house. We want to look good, we want to be pretty, we want to perform, but if none of us ever performed again, we would be okay with that because we are active in our community as drag performers. And so we end up kind of moving away from just the drag performer aspect, and drag character ends up being more of an apt description, because we're going out into the community as an oversized character to kind of amplify our voice. Because a lot of times, just another normal person talking on the microphone or talking about something maybe isn't listened to quite as well, or doesn't get the same attention as a 6.5 foot tall glitter monster. And it's using our privilege as performers, because there is a certain amount of privilege that comes with that. There are a certain amount of things that aren't exactly privileges that come with being the most visible person in a bar. But being that visible focal point is one of our tools to talk about social advocacy. We also are very much about claiming safe space, because if there's a drag queen somewhere, typically that means either the bar is paying them to be there, or you feel safe enough to be a very strange looking person in that space. And that can very much signal to other queer people that it is safe to be yourself here. And so that is, that's something that we also find very important. I know that was kind of long-winded, but.
Let me ask about equity and inclusion, both racial equity and artistic equity. Start with race. Is community inclusive? How diverse is it?
We are not very diverse, but we are very inclusive. Asheville is not a very, at least the Asheville drag community is not a very color-rich, diverse community. There are performers of color, and they are given space to perform, but it's very difficult to toe the line between tokenization and inclusion, because there's only like a handful of performers of color. It becomes kind of difficult you don't want to call the same handful of people over and over and over and over again, because that's just exhausting on them. And I personally have a hard time, not trying not to tokenize people. And so what we do if I try and curate a show is making sure that I have a wide, diverse cast, be it kings, queens, drag monsters who don't really identify on either side of the spectrum as performers, and do a wide variety of races as well. And so, because I want to encourage other people of color to feel comfortable doing drag. And you're not going to encourage that. You're not going to change the community if you're only booking white queens over and over and over again. That's just going to create a feedback loop of more white queens. And so giving space and making sure that you are contacting and talking with and making sure you're involved with the performers of color to be at your shows and perform in them, and also they get compensated correctly, encourages more people of color to participate. Asheville, at least at the drag shows I've been to, it's been primarily a white audience. And so it can be a little difficult to encourage that, but it's a constant battle that we just, you have to do, especially in this day and age.
When I moved here, I was surprised to see how little we pay drag performers, but I was told that that's because they make it up in tips. Do you like that model? What?
I mean, so I think it depends. I know if I'm at a busy show, I can make enough to where I am making a decent hourly rate. But I tell my kids, my drag kids, when you're starting to be asked how much is your booking fee, I would love to say you need to pay me $500 before I'll even walk in the door, but we all know that's not going to happen. The only people who are paid that much are the RuPaul girls who have been on national television. And so what I like to do is think about your experience, think about your materials, and think about your time. And so what I do if I'm ever asked how much I'm being booked for, I think about how many hours does it take to get ready, to make the costume that I'm going to be wearing, how many hours am I going to be at the venue there. So my hourly rate is when I first started, I tried to do $10 an hour. So it's an hour and a half to 2 hours to get into makeup, an hour or two to make the costume, and then I'm going to be at the bar for about 3 hours. So at minimum, I typically try and charge $50, especially if it's a community organization or a charity. And then if it's a packed house, I know I will be leaving with enough tips to make it worth it, to pay for the makeup, which is very expensive, to pay for the materials that I used on the costume, or to pay for the costume. to pay for the shoes, because God knows shoes are expensive. Um, I wish we could be paid more, but it's a reality of a performer's life until you're at a level where your guarantee is $500, $1,000. There's no way that you're going to be making that much money. I've done drag shows for like a box of tacos before. I've done drag shows for a Steak and Shake coupon. I've done drag shows for free and tips only. And, you know, I've come away with like $600 in tips from one night. I've come away with two. And so it sucks, but it also is amazing. It's kind of like waiting tables. You know, you're paid $2.15 an hour, but sometimes you get a table who's going to tip you $100, and sometimes you get a table who's going to tip you $5. And so there's really no guarantee, but you're in it. It's your job, and that's how you do it.
What kind of audiences do you like? And to be even more specific, after COVID, when we all start going back out, what kind of audiences do you hope to see in 2021?
Personally, I love people who have never seen drag before. Just to like see them and like hear them be in awe or like totally like in shock at what they see. I also really love students. I love student shows. I love college kids. I love the younger, like middle and high school aged kids. I love kids shows. They are typically the most fun shows I have ever been to because the energy is insane. Everybody there is just super excited that you're there. And a lot of times you don't make that much money in tips at kids shows because they're children or they're broke college kids. But the emotional reward is absolutely worth it for me. I also really like large crowds. So like Pride is one of my favorite things to be able to participate in because the crowd, it's the energy level. It's absolutely out of this world. I hope to see more people at drag shows, just because I know a lot of the drag performers that I do know who do this full time are really struggling right now. And I miss some of my regulars that I see who like follow me to different bars or different places I'm performing. I really do miss those interactions. And I hope that we just see more people out. I think drag is something that can be enjoyed by everyone. And I want people to enjoy it.
We're going through a lot in Asheville
Mm-hmm.
now, and you mentioned that some people are struggling in their community. I was talking recently to one of the healthcare clinics, and they're watching very closely for any signs that alcoholism or other forms of substance abuse might be on the rise.
Yeah.
What are you seeing any serious issues in not just the drag community, but in the Asheville community and amongst all your friends?
I don't really know. I just recently had to get a job as a server. And I've noticed myself drinking a bit more, not to the point where it's like a problem, but I definitely have seen an increase in my own personal like alcohol use. I think it's been a little difficult on substance dependent drag queens because a lot of times while we're out at a bar, for instance, we get like drink tickets or a free drink because it's good for bar advertisement if their entertainment is also drinking. And that can create a little bit of a dependency, just because you're around it all the time. And it's something that I kind of understood now more as a server, because I'm at a bar every day. And after I'm done working, it's really nice to have a drink with my coworkers. Before COVID, when I was a drag queen, I really didn't drink very often when I was in drag, because a lot of the performances I do are very intense acrobatics that I could get hurt if I was tipsy. And so I have become a little bit more understanding, and it makes more sense to me why and how people can become substance dependent when working in and around bar culture. But I can't say that I know, I can't say that I have seen any increase in alcohol usage or anything during COVID. Mostly what I've seen is people not being able to afford things, food, for instance, primarily because all of your income, if it was performance-based, you're not doing in-person performances right now. And online shows can be amazing, and they also can be horrible for money making. And there's not really a nice middle ground in there. It's either you made a ton of money because a lot of people saw your live feed or your video and Venmo'd you a bunch of tips, or, your best friends saw it who are all as broke as you and nobody tipped you. And that's been kind of difficult, I know, for a lot of drag performers.
Thank you. This has been very edifying. And I hope that this all ends soon, and that
Me
we're
too.
back watching you on stage.
Yeah.
Natasha, thank you so much.
No problem. Have a good rest of your day.